Craig here for another edition of Make America Healthy Again with my friend Jan Jeremias of Paws Path. Hey, Jan.
Hey, Craig, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Jan is a animal health and wellness counselor working specifically with dogs and cats. If you haven't seen her on our discussions before, but she works pretty specifically in holistic wellness with dogs and cats. But the interesting thing about Paws Path is when you and I got together to work on your digital media, is that how you said how the journey was about with the pet and the owner alike, and that we see this. I mean, we live in an area where everybody's got a dog, and the dog and the owners, they all look alike, and that, I mean, we're all familiar with that, dynamic, how the personalities interchange, right?
Mhm.
And I guess you picked up on that with your work, and that when a pet is going through something, that the caretaker, the owner, is also going through a similar. I don't. Can you expand a little bit? I might not be getting that exactly right.
No, yeah. I just find as in my work, as I speak to people and I work with them and their animals, that I think it struck me in the beginning how often they would have the same issue physically. How I would meet an owner or a caretaker that came to me because their animal had, let's say, kidney and bladder problems. And in the conversation, they would say, oh, I also have kidney and bladder problems. And it just struck me how often physically you'll get, caretakers who are taking care of animals who have similar or identical issues, health issues going on. But also which I think is linked to how much our emotions are held in our physical body. And usually if you have an anxious owner, you have an anxious pet, and if you have a calm owner and somebody who's laid back, a lot of the time you'll have a pet that's pretty laid back, an animal that's pretty laid back.
Mm-hmm. So you're drawing the causal relationship here between these internal illnesses and our emotions more so than diet, lifestyle. I mean, because we're not eating the same thing as our pets necessarily. I mean, I guess, there could be the same environmental impacts of our pets,
Right.
as far as chemicals and materials within the home that outgas a certain way, and water and such, right? So,
I mean, I'm sure that plays a part, but I think also the whole emotional dynamic. And I thought about this because this just happened the other day, because I had a friend of mine who called me who one of her cats had passed away.
mm-hmm.
And she texted me like 2 days later to tell me that one of the other cats actually has developed some sort of upper respiratory sinus infection, as has she. So I thought, okay, well, how interesting. The other thing is that those emotions are held, the emotion of grief is held in the sinus and the upper respiratory system in Chinese medicine. And I thought, well, how interesting is that? Because it almost happened the cat was perfectly healthy before the other cat passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And now they both have developed this sort of upper respiratory sinus issue, which I'm sure, has to do with the element of grief.
Yep. So do you look to Chinese medicine? Because I'm a little bit familiar with how Chinese medicine relates in their 5-element system to emotions, and how to different systems, organs, seasons, foods, and such. Is that what you look to as a guide?
That is one thing I know. I have to say I have limited knowledge of Chinese medicine. I have a little knowledge, but the knowledge I do have, I feel really serves me. And then sometimes when I'm making recommendations, I will actually draw from Chinese medicine or maybe Indian or Ayurvedic medicine, because I think they look at the organism, whether it be an animal organism or a person organism, as a whole, as opposed to much more traditional, I think, modalities, Western medicine or traditional veterinary medicine, which tends to look at the animal, or in medicine, the human, as being compartmentalized. There's this system and then there's that system. And I try to look at much more as an integration.
Right. So I know you work a lot with essential oils, aromatherapy with pets. So when addressing, I guess what you're saying now is that if there's a shared, kidney sinus problem with the pet and the owner, you're not able to prescribe remedies for the owner, obviously, because you're not licensed that way. But I mean, in working with the pets and working with the owners, then how does that process work? How do you then bring it up? Is it just by putting awareness on the issue?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's making the caretaker aware. When I make my recommendations, I might make recommendations that, let's say, physically support an organ system, but also might support the emotion that's held there. So, for example, if I'm dealing with kidneys and bladder, the emotion is usually fear. And so I might recommend some oils that are really good for, countering fear, whether it be stability and grounding or courage. And so I sort of, when I make my recommendations, I might draw from both. And sometimes I come up, like I'll be talking about a kidney bladder issue, and I'll talk to I'll speak with the caretaker, and I'll draw, and they'll look at me because they think some of my recommendations, if they know essential oils, are kind of strange and sort of out of the box. But that's what I found really works. Like, I have clients, and I think that because I'm looking at it from both angles, the healing tends to happen because we are systems that are emotional beings.
Yep. Well, it's emotional. And it's interesting when you talk about essential oils, and that you sort of have to kind of put that disclaimer that because people find them to be ersatz, bizarre, unproven, what have you. And I've been thinking a lot about the whole issue, how we address healthcare in general. We think about healthcare in this country, and when President Trump last week said dealing with healthcare is difficult. It's difficult if you stick within this really difficult system, But if you're like a lot of Americans like us, and you've opened your mind up to traditional energetic forms of healing, it's not that difficult actually, and you're putting your trust into something that may not be laboratory approved and stamped, and there might not be a big business behind it, but it's efficacious nonetheless.
That's right, and I think that won't go through into the whole essential oil world where in the fact that I think that a lot of it is not, I would say, readily accepted because of, the cost and things like that, which, people look. But I think that once you start to address things more from the root cause as being an entire being, you start to see great changes. I think a lot of problems ensue because people try to address, or even in our animal world where we're trying to, take care of our animals, is we address it as we looked at the symptomatology, the fact that, I'll have an animal that'll come to me with chronic sinus and, upper respiratory stuff. And if you address it purely from the physical standpoint, the animal never gets better because you're not addressing that emotional element. So the underlying cause is not really going away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and hence the difficulty, because you can only put so many Band-Aids on a problem without going to why is there bleeding in the first place.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So and we should let viewers know that you work mostly with people remotely. People don't need to be wherever you are in order to engage with you and work with you. Most people you work with the way we're talking right now, over Skype or FaceTime or some sort of digital kind of connecting tool where you can actually and do help pets and their owners mostly remotely.
Yeah. Every now and then, obviously I, live in an area and somebody will have me come over and see their animal, and I'll, talk to them about it or show them some ways to apply essential oils or what to do. But most of the time it's over the phone or via FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, all the sort of electronic forms of communication that we have now. And it works beautifully. Because it's mainly just an information gathering. And for, a lot of times, I think a lot of what I do is help people to see sometimes what they're not able to see.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're too close to a situation to see it. And sometimes we just need to be made aware. And then I can actually give them solutions, which is a nice thing, because you want to offer somebody solutions and hope for whatever they're dealing with. And so I can offer solutions, but it's really just a really dynamic conversation that is had over maybe multiple days or a week of just gathering as much information. And sometimes I will get back to the caretaker in a few days, because after I've asked a few questions, all of a sudden they start to look at their animal differently. And they're not looking at, their animal in the same way. And they're like, oh, I never noticed this before, but, so.
Right. So people interested in knowing more can go to your website, which is called pawspath.com. I'll make sure I put the link in the description below. And look forward to catching up again soon, and people can learn how to more naturally and holistically help their pets and help themselves in the same process.
Yes, thank you so much, Craig.
Have a great day.
You too.